Record. Okay, and here we go. This is beneficial insects, and most of the information on this presentation, just so you know, and I'll put this on the website, comes from the website guide-to-agriculture.com, a series of articles called Identification of Beneficial and Harmful Insects in Agricultural Crops. But it also talks about some other things. So in terms of agriculture, identification of what insects are in the fields is necessary because insects play an important role in agriculture. Some destroy crops, others are pollinators, or they kill destructive insects and eat them, which is good. And for them, ID of harmful insects determines what type of pesticide to use, because there are different ones that are aimed, believe it or not, at different insects. Some pesticides will kill certain types of insects and not bother others, which is a great thing. The other side of it is gardening, and the same insects that are beneficial to crops are beneficial to gardens as well. Some of the beneficial are not as desirable to people, like carpenter bees and wasps. Songbird species are harmed by pesticides, so it's really problematic if you use that. And the other thing we face is some songbirds eat beneficial insects, which doesn't really help the campaign, but it's a part of nature and it is what it is. So now we have a top 8 beneficial crop and garden insects. There are, of course, others, but these are the ones that are of most benefit, and some of these might surprise you. Number 1 is the ladybug, or lady beetle, as they are called. Number 2, bees, which of course we know a lot about. Number 3, spiders. Number 4, earthworms, which we also know quite a bit about from other presentations and from our own experience. Number 5 is a surprising one, which is green lacewings, which actually are found pretty much all over the world. Number 6, hoverflies, and we'll go into a little detail about what they are. Number 7, parasitic wasps. And then number 8, the mantids. So that's the top 8. And we're going to go through these one by one. First of all, the ladybug or lady beetle. They feed on other harmful insects like aphids and mealybugs. They also feed on pollen of flowers, and in doing so, they ultimately help in pollination, so they are pollinators. They can feed on up to 50 different types of harmful pests. They, like us, have a pretty wide range of what they like for food. And their lifespan is about 1 year. So they can do an awful lot of eating harmful insects. In terms of identification, they are a red or orange color with black spots. The wings are round shaped. And in Christi's presentation, you will see some really good examples of the color and spot range that these actually have. And in this particular photo, those white spots you see just behind the head, those are called white cheeks, which are an identifying mark.
Also pay close attention to the white spots behind the head area. And I don't know my body parts of insects that well. I know thorax, but do you see where the shell divides for where the wings come out of? Those white spots there? We'll talk about that later, but that's a good identifying mark for the native ones.
Right.
And the white cheeks.
Okay.
Okay, so number 2 are favorite bees that we love and worry about so much. They pollinate about 90 different varieties of crops, believe it or not, and they feed on nectar from flowers. Interestingly enough, the whole of almond production all around the world is completely dependent on bees.
Wow.
Bees are the only pollinators of almond plants. And now this is why people worry so much about the fate of bees. About 1/3 of food consumed by humans is pollinated by bees. And that goes back to this thing of the 90 different varieties of crops. And identification, I think we all know about. They are generally black in color with yellow and sometimes white stripes in their abdomen, and they create that familiar buzzing sound as they fly. So number 3, spiders. Spiders feed on aphids, caterpillars, and harmful beetle species. Aphids a big one with these beneficial insects because there's a whole lot of species of aphids, and aphids reproduce really quickly over and over and over, and they are with the reproduction kind of like our adage about rabbits. You know, they spend a lot of time reproducing, and you know, they're in an area can just be thousands of these things, and spiders and the lady beetles just love them. Their webs, as I think we know, act as a natural trap for different flies, which harm crops. Flies are actually the easiest thing for them to trap in their webs. And identification, I think we all know, 6 legs and often a hairy abdomen, if not, as we see here, all parts of their bodies. Now, number 4, earthworms. Earthworms are, I gotta move something here. Okay, earthworms are known as the farmer's friend. We know from our soils and bedrock program, they loosen the soil and help plants grow faster and healthier by, number 1, creating that air and water space in the soil, especially around the roots of plants. And they actually feed on the soil and eject something called vermicast, which is very rich in enzymes and nutrients. A worm will eat half of its body weight in one day. And farmers buy earthworms to put in their fields to increase crop production, believe it or not. And identification is that long, almost beige, slimy body with a clitellum in the middle, which is that kind of longish section in the middle. and they live under the surface. Now, to go into a little more detail on this, vermicast, it comes from something called vermicomposting, which is a system where redworms, a type of earthworm, are fed waste like kitchen scraps or commercially animal waste. As the worms process that material, they add many essential nutrients back to the soil. The castings that they excrete are collected and used as fertilizer. Vermicast can itself be used as a topsoil, mixed with other soils, or as a worm tea, which can be sprayed on agricultural fields. And vermicast is a more refined version of vermicompost. And when we say castings and casings, think worm droppings, because that's what it is. It's worm droppings. And if you ever buy from a store, a bait store or whatever, carry out store, earthworms to fish with, that material that they are in the container, that really dark stuff like you see in this photo here, that is not dirt, it is vermicast. So
Did you hear anything about, there's some kind of invasive species of worm that is killing off our good worms?
Couple of the jumping worms are one. There are two different kinds, and I think I touched on it a couple of months ago, I think, but yeah, and they're starting to see like in soil piles where you get soil from companies. Yeah, and they're just full of them now, and the mulch piles are full of them too. And these jumping worms, they go crazy, they wriggle around. And I think I had put it on one of my slides a while ago. The state Department of Agriculture is actually asking you to report sightings of them. But
yeah, and I think, I don't know if that's the same one, but they said something about don't try and cut it in half or something, because it'll just regenerate and then you'll have
make more.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely, called the jumping worms. Yep. One of the problems the state is working with bait shops, like Don mentioned, because a lot of the more invasive worms come in through that, and they say don't empty out your bait when you have live worms in there, because a lot of those are not native. But bearing in mind, I brought this up before, that what we know as our earthworms in our garden, those are actually not native to the US.
Right.
Yep. So
yeah, a lot of the earthworms, the big ones that you get, actually come from Canada.
Yeah, night crawlers. Yep. Yeah.
Any questions on vermicast before we move on? When you turn your last thing I'll add, when you turn your compost pile or your compost pit and you see earthworms in there, part of what they're doing in there is creating this vermicast. They are helping the health of your compost.
Would the snakes in the compost eat those worms?
I don't know.
Well,
not sure.
I think we had talked about this in relationship to the glaciation, because when you think about it, when the glaciated parts of Ohio and other states too, where the soil was all scraped off, so the worms were gone. So that's why the ones that were brought in and that have made it here and repopulated it, it's quite useful. So it's interesting to read about the native worms versus what was brought in.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, now number 5, this little guy, green lace wings. they feed on a large range of harmful organisms. As predators, they feed, again, here's somebody else, feeds on aphids. They feed on mites, whiteflies, and caterpillars. In terms of identification, they have a clear transparent wing and are green in color, this light green, little lighter than a blade of grass. And this is a very good example of one here. Green lacewings are actually an underappreciated group of beneficial insects because they're not generally known. As with lady beetles, they are important predators of many types of soft-bodied insects and insect eggs. They are common spring through fall, and as the articles that I read online said, their contribution to insect control is immense. The adults are about 3/4 of an inch long and light green, as I said. They have a delicate appearance with lacy wings. And the one unusual characteristic is the eyes, which they look like two golden hemispheres. They are actually weak flyers, and just like lady beetles, commonly found near aphid colonies. Now, the adults feed mostly on nectar, pollen, and honeydew, but some species, the adults feed strictly on insects. And to the left here, we have the stages. The egg gets planted, if you will, attached to a plant on this slender hair, like you see here. And then it becomes a pupa, which actually drops down onto the leaf or stem of a plant. And then on the lower left, you see a larvae, and the larvae feed on soft-bodied insects and other insects' eggs. And then they become an adult, like you see here. Large wings for their body size, very long antenna. And let me move this here. The larvae, as I mentioned, they feed voraciously on aphids. They just go crazy for aphids. They are also major crop pollinators. Whoops. I've got to go back. I missed something here. Bear with me a second, because I got the top of this next slide cut off. Hoverflies we are on now. My apologies. Hoverflies, their larvae feed voraciously on aphids, and they are major crop pollinators. And if you look at these photos, especially the one in the middle there and the one on the far left, because of that appearance, they are sometimes mistaken for horseflies or deer flies, and people try to kill them, which they are not. In terms of identification, they are dark and have light stripes. Sometimes their appearance mimics bees or smaller stinging wasps, as you also see in the full photos. They are actually quite populous, and they move around a whole lot from plant to plant, which makes them good pollinators. So number 7, parasitic wasps. As predators, this is another one that feeds on aphids, mites, whiteflies, caterpillars, and other insects that are harmful to crops. They also are crop pollinators, even though people don't really like wasps. They are crop pollinators. And interestingly enough, there is something called a fig wasp, and they are the only pollinators of fig trees.
Hmm.
Huh.
No other species, but the fig wasp pollinates fig trees. So they are very important to fig growers.
Ever seen, if you grow tomatoes, tomato hornworms in your garden with big yellow and red spikes coming out of the back?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Okay, that is from the parasitic wasp. It's been parasitized. The wasps lay their eggs inside the caterpillar, which does not destroy the caterpillar right away, and it shows the growths coming out. But then when they do hatch, they have plenty to eat.
Yep.
And
oh,
it's quite sad. The first time I learned about it, my kids were little, they found it on the tomatoes. And when I found out what it was pretty horrifying actually, but you're best off letting them go, stay on the tomatoes in the garden, and parasitic wasps do their things.
Yep. Now, in terms of identification, parasitic wasps are typically have clear, transparent wings and are black or black and yellow striped. One exception being the one in this picture here, and that's a fig wasp. That is what they look like. They really don't have stripes. They're black with almost opaque looking legs, and their long abdomen is a mixture of black and opaque areas. So number 8 are mantids. They are another one. They feed on a wide variety of things, but here's another one that feeds on aphids, asparagus beetles, caterpillars, Colorado potato beetles, earwigs, leafhoppers, Mexican bean beetles, and squash bugs. So that makes them very beneficial to crops because that covers a pretty wide variety. Even just asparagus, potatoes, and beans alone, and squash, those are some major crops there.
yeah.
However, unfortunately, praying mantids also eat beneficial insects like butterflies and bees, if they can catch them.
And hummingbirds.
Yeah, and hummingbirds.
Been known to grab a hummingbird.
Wow.
Praying mantids, unlike a lot of the others we've talked about, do not consume pollen or nectar, but plants that produce pollen and nectar will attract insects that the mantids eat. So they will often be seen around those types of plants because they're waiting for a meal to come by. And in terms of identification, I think we've all seen them. Large, slender insects with light brown or green coloring, up to 5 inches long, with enlarged front legs and prominent eyes. They have wings, but they fly only to mate.
Whoa.
And we have 2 types here. Our native is the Carolina mantid, praying mantis, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Christy, that's the one that's all green.
Yes,
And then the Chinese mantis,
but smaller.
which is an invasive, is green and brown.
Much larger.
Yes, much, much larger.
Yeah.
Those are the really huge ones.
Mhm.
So that's our top 8. And of course, like I said, there are others. There's a lot of other insects that are beneficial because they pollinate and eat other insects, but these are the ones that do the most damage to the non-beneficial
Yeah.
insect populations. So any questions? The wolf spider asks, I do see you with my 6 eyes.
What do you know about nemodes?
Yes, question?
What do you know about nemodes?
About what?
Nematodes.
Nematodes, thank you.
Yep.
That's something I've not heard of before.
Oh, we'll do a show. You need to look it up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that much about it, but I've been getting some mail about you can buy them.
Yes. Yep.
I was thinking about it.
I think
Huh.
we need to circle back on agricultural issues too, and that would be another good one to do. And instead of disrupting it right now, I'm
Yeah,
gonna save that one.
sounds good to me.
Okay.
Fascinating worlds that you don't know about, with huge numbers you don't know about. It's very interesting.
And I'm stopping my share and you should see me again.
Oh, I
Well,
do
this
have
all
one other
cycle.
question.
Yeah.
The neem oil that we use to help control, would that hurt these beneficial insects?
Christy,
I
you
think it does
have any
actually,
insight?
soft-bodied. Yeah.
Oh, okay, then I won't use it.
I need to look it up because that's one of the safest alternatives for your vegetables I know. And I've
Right.
been counseling my son-in-law, one of my son-in-laws about that also. He's got some pretty nasty outbreaks on his raspberries right now. So not all, but it is a safer alternative to some of the bad pesticides that we have. But yeah, it's safe for eating on your vegetables, but that's tough. I'm gonna, Dawn, if you can make a note of that about neem oil and then nematodes. We'll circle back. We'll talk about it afterwards.
Okay.
The one thing that I wanted to pull out of, but I love Dawn's slides, these were so good, is kind of what we do and what inspired me the most about getting my OCBN was these interrelationships. And Don on his agricultural show, he talked about monocultures. And when you think of things that the insects eat or what the insects are eating that feed on our crops, and then you have whole fields of these monoculture fields of one crop, what's going to happen to the balance? You're going to have the insects that feed on the crops reproduce like crazy to eat on that. You're going to get things completely out of balance because for a while, the predators of the insects that eat that crop are not going to catch up yet. And then when they do, and then they rotate crops, and it's just, you know, what you learn about being a naturalist are how delicate we see these balances and how things get disrupted and why, you know, monocultures are bad. And we have a problem, but crop rotation will help with that. But this is why we have such abundant use of insecticides.
Yes, and monoculture can be it can be economically disastrous for farmers too. If they have hundreds and hundreds of acres and they plant just one crop on all of it, if the market falls through on the crop for the year, or it ends up undervalued, or we end up with a surplus, farmers lose a lot of money, a lot of money. And you know, what do you do with surplus out in your fields that there's no point in harvesting because you're not going to get any money for it?
Yeah.
And for some of these things, there's no government assistance. You know, if you grow corn or you grow soybeans or wheat, if there is a surplus issue or what have you, an economic issue, and you can't sell that stuff, you know, the government gives you a payoff as a farmer. But if you were someone who grows anything else, you do not get that. There are not government surplus payoffs for somebody that just grows lettuce or just grows broccoli or you know, just grows carrots. They don't have that benefit. So it's there's a lot of financial gambling here and risk. It's almost like playing the stock market for these people.
Which is why there has to be big money behind it for corporate farming.
Right.
But there also is the issue of just the ability to feed the world at this point. So
Yep.
it's a lot of balances here, but very interesting show. But it's just from a natural standpoint is you can see ecological disasters happening.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was watching a PBS thing, and they were talking about how much the oh gosh, what do you call it now? Hydroponic growing has taken off.
Yeah. There's a big tomato farm in Delaware County too. I knew some people that had started that up. I don't know if it's still the same people, but you avoid a lot of the insects that way.
Yeah.
And some of the cleaning issue because of the pathogens found in the dirt too.
Right.
So,
Right.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
Okay,
Interesting.
Christy, well, you're all set to go. You're all set for
Okay,
screen share.
Hit my screen. Whoops. Let's see if this is going to work.
There we go.
All right. Ladybugs, because it started, as I said, native or not and mimics. And then I started getting to the ladybugs. So I had to add that to the title here because this is absolutely fascinating. So in my observations, I've seen lots of varieties of ladybugs. And when I got into this and I'm Googling things like crazy, like I said, I have like 10 tabs open. How many species of ladybugs in the US? 150-ish, but not all documented.
Oh my gosh.
We don't know this. I know. And we don't know this for sure. That's why I love to belong to iNaturalist and do observations because they're still trying to count. Same way with the ant estimates and all that. So, and 4,500 species of ladybugs in the world. And as Dawn said, and the more I learned, these are super fascinating and very, very, very beneficial. A lot of those counts put ladybug as the most beneficial insect.
Right.
So ladybugs are not true bugs. True bugs, like all bugs are insects, but bugs have mouth parts, think of a straw for piercing and sucking in plants. And there are other things too. We'll talk about that some other time. But so that starts with they're not a bug, but they're an insect. They're on the beetle family. Entomologists call them, as Don did one of his slides, a ladybird beetle or the lady beetle. And it's in the beetle order, the Arthropoda, and orders Coleoptera. And the family is, I got to get my Latin out here. I had practiced at Coccinellidae, I guess. In Slavic, European, American, and Asian cultures, the ladybugs have always symbolized positivity, good luck, and goodness. And some of the things that surround ladybugs are the more spots they have and the darker the color, it's more of a potential blessing and fortune.
Huh.
And some other places have, and I have heard this growing up. What does it mean when a ladybug lands on you? I've heard people say it's lucky when a ladybug lands on you. Well, that's before our Asian invaders, when ladybugs were a little bit more rare to see in the suburban settings. So what does it mean when a ladybug lands on you? Well, it may be a reminder of who you truly are. Never lose your path in life. Sometimes you may doubt yourself, but those cute little creatures will come to you to remind you of your purpose. That was a quote from a site that I found. And then ladybugs are on totems. And this is something else I wanted to do. So totems, and Dawn had a question about this, we associate with Native Americans. And the totems are, we think of totem poles and they symbolize the larger the people, then the tribe, and then your village level, and then down to the family level, and then down to you. They have animals or insects or creatures that represent each of these that you have adopted as your your clan and on down. And that was one of the symbols that they have, like you wouldn't marry somebody in the same totem because they're all considered a relative and they have the same totem. So
Huh.
that is actually from Africa. I've always associated that, particularly with some of the Pacific Northwest tribes too. But actually, totems are all throughout Africa, even, which I found fascinating. And that will be another deep dive I'll have to do later. I read a lot and it's very interesting. But people that have the ladybug on their totem are funny, lively, and lucky. Those people know how to make others happy. They love deep and meaningful conversations, and they're always looking for new information. People with ladybug totems get tired of social settings if they find them uninspiring. So I really think that my spirit animal must be a ladybug. If that's me. I just thought that was just so interesting. So, and I've said before, my husband is from England, and in England they're called ladybirds, and it confused my kids because we have there's a major children's publishing company, and it's Ladybird Books there, and their little symbol, their little logo has a ladybug on it, and also all of the children's books there, they use ladybird instead of ladybug with the illustrations. And my kids are quite bilingual with British English and American English. So they just naturally figured this out. But so, and I always have to correct myself. Oh, there's a ladybug. Oh, it's a ladybird. And I don't know why they would call this a bird. So I dove into that. So in England, ladybirds were named after the Virgin Mary. And the native, oops, oh my goodness. And I don't know how to get back to this. I do. Because if you look at middle-aged paintings, Virgin Mary was often wearing a red cloak. And the native ladybird in England has 7 spots. And you know, 7 biblically is one of the lucky numbers too. And Virgin Mary was often depicted wearing a cloak. 7 spots of a ladybird represent the 7 sorrows and the 7 joys of Mary. And you know, I'm not Catholic, so I drew this out, but I did go to Georgetown and took Bible literature in Georgetown a lot. And they always talk about the number 7. And the Virgin Mary is often referred to as Our Lady, hence Lady Bird. The bird part of the name, as this author said, can only assume coming from the fact that ladybirds have wings and can fly. That was under thingsIforgot.co.uk. And originally, going back in time, they were called Our Lady's Bird or Lady's Beetle, again referring to Mary. In Germany, they're called Marienkäfer or Marian's Chafer. And a chafer is a scarab beetle, types of scarab beetles. So again, a Marian as in Mary beetle. And this is interesting too. In first colonization, they have shown sources saying they were called ladybugs in the US as early as 1699, not ladybirds, which makes no sense to me at all because the early colonists, well, from Dutch and also, but from England. So why did that change? And fascinating. So this cool picture, Dawn had talked about the variation in colors, and it's tremendous. They don't always have to have spots, or some you can't see and blend in, but this is a great collection of different colors of it and different variations and sizes. The one characteristic on these you can see is their head, the head part color is black. And these are all native ones. They do come in a variety of colors. They have the white cheeks.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting to look at this. I love this picture. So the life cycle of a ladybug. At the top, you can see the eggs. And they go through larval stages. Larva eats voraciously and gets larger and larger. The pupa stage is when you first see the spots and the color emerging. And then it goes into like and I actually have seen this before, like a yellow with the black head, but without the spots. For the juvenile and then to the adult. And then you have 2 ladybugs together, a man ladybug and a girl ladybug, and they lay the eggs. So that is what the cycle looks like. On the right side picture, somebody actually caught the progress of this, of the larva and the pupa stage, which is kind of interesting, close up on the leaf there. Okay. So I did know this, that ladybugs taste bad. I've always heard they were poisonous too. So I did look this up. A ladybug's body has a substance in it that tastes really bad to birds and other predators. And it is a little bit poisonous. Probably not poison enough to kill a bird, but enough to make it pretty sick for a while. So they're saying once a bird eats the first ladybug, it will get so sick, it's not going to ever want to eat another one. And it's going to remember the unique colors and the spots of the ladybug, and they'll stay away. There are a lot of myths about ladybugs and their spots. In Brussels, which my one son-in-law is from that area, from near Brussels in Ghent, Belgium. If a ladybug lands on you in Brussels, the spots on that ladybug tell you how many children you will have.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
I know, I know. Many farmers around the world have also believed that the spots of a ladybug tell the fortune of your next harvest. If there are less than 7 spots, the harvest will be good. So I would have thought more spots would be better, but less than 7.
Yeah.
hmm.
Some people believe that if a ladybug lands on you, you can count the spots and you will soon receive dollars in the same amount as the spots. And they just said, believe what you want about ladybug spots. But the fact is they just make ladybugs the cutest beetle in the world. Okay.
Now,
So-
can they bite you?
Mhm.
So that's interesting. I did some reading on that. I have
Certain
been bitten by
species.
ladybugs before.
Mhm.
And they also leave like a yellowish, gooey liquid stuff. And that's not something, maybe it's more saliva. So I read about this, that for some reason, and I don't have it exactly in front of me, but I think it said from 2012, 13, and 2014, there were reports that they were biting more.
Mhm.
Some of the people said that was related to droughts. I also thought it was just the Asian ones that were the ones that were
Yeah,
biting.
that's what I thought.
That's what I have heard. And it's interesting.
Yeah, that's what I heard too.
And I am remiss in not having a slide about that. But I did, in one of the tabs I had open, I read about that they don't generally bite people. If you're an aphid, watch
Right.
out, not people. But for a couple of years in a row, it was known to have more reports of being bitten and even sometimes a small rash by a ladybug. And I know for sure that I was, but I'm pretty sure it was an Asian one.
Hmm.
So then we get into this horrific nursery rhyme. And that's just a whole nother topic too, but nursery rhymes often have terrible meanings behind them, and they're pretty horrid when you think about them. One of my sister-in-laws, who was a teacher, told me a lot about this, and she had a book which she can't find again, but it was stories behind nursery rhymes. And it's just unbelievable what some of them mean. It's a topic you can Google, but the ladybug rhyme has a hidden meaning also. And it goes from the 18th century England, and they have it first published in 1744, but they have shown that it actually existed before then. They also said that ladybugs were considered great fire alarms, and ladybugs were some of the first insects to flee from a fire, but smoke at the first hint of a fire. And they say if the ladybugs were flying out of your house, you need to get out because something bad is about to happen with the fire. So the meaning for children is, if the children are singing this rhyme, they're trying to impart, because all the nursery rhymes have a purpose, that when a ladybird lands on you, in order to make it fly away, they said make a wish and the bug will fly away and the wish will come true, not flicking it off.
Mhm.
Also, there's a belief that to kill a ladybug brings you bad luck. So they taught the children to sing this song or recite this poem to make the bug return home. And they said this might have been an explanation for the educational purpose of the song, to protect those little bugs and not harm or kill them, which of course, in agricultural agrarian times, that was extremely important. So the words go, ladybird or ladybug, ladybird, fly away home. Your house is on fire and your children will burn. How horrible is that? All except one,
know.
her name was Anne, and she hid under the baking pan. Well, they said also people would spontaneously change the name to whatever their child's name was. So here's the other thing behind this. Again, some horrific ugliness, I guess, because of the religious connotation of that being with Virgin Mary and some of the names that they would use, like Saint Anne here for Anne.
Mhm.
They actually are dating the rhyme back to the 16th century, so the 1500s. And they sang it as a warning when there was legislation against Catholics. That was
Huh.
a divorce thing. And so they would say that, they would have the kids say that as a warning, that the Catholics, that you need to, there's danger about, be careful. Another story connects it with a story that after prayers to help Our Lady brought the insect to destroy a plague of plant destroying pests. So they're saying the prayers, they were praying and ladybug came in, destroyed the aphids, and therefore the ladybug was raised even higher up. According to other lore, farmers recite the rhyme to save the insects who do them the service before setting fire to the stubble fields. So they would say, hey, get out of here, ladybugs. You guys are really beneficial. Go back home again. I'm about to set fire to the stubble to clear my fields.
Yeah.
So, and that's what they said. Among children, it's common to place the ladybird on their hand or blow it from their clothing to make a wish while reciting this rhyme. Again, on the speculation for it. Actually, I'm so sorry. I must have copied that in twice. That's all for that slide. I'm sorry. I had trouble. My computer kind of crashed right before the show here. So on this page here, tell me what side you think are invasive and the non-invasives. Anybody want to say left side? What do you think that is on the left
Right
side?
side. Right side.
Is
Well,
invasive?
you've got,
Yep.
yeah, I was gonna say the left side has the white spots behind its thing, so
It
I would,
does.
Well, the right side, they do not have black heads.
Yep, that's a
well,
good
that's true
observation.
too.
They've got
Yep.
more of the white heads instead of just the white cheeks, even though that can vary. They also
Right.
have, they talked about it being like an M on the head, but there are some variations to the Asian ones. And the Asian ones are like more dome shaped, they're rounder. And the native ones, throughout all of our native ones, they're also more, a little bit flatter, not as rounded on the top. Color variations is not, because I always used to think it was more the orange and maybe
Right.
fewer spots, but that's really not the case. And the head parts too, where the mouth parts are slightly different on the native ones too, but I know there are just so many different kinds. So that is right. The right-hand side are variations showing the Asian beetles, and then the left-hand side are some of the native ones.
I don't think I've ever seen a yellow one though. I don't remember ever seeing one.
Yes, look at it, because in the fall when they start invading, you'll see a lot more. And take a good look at them, because I have seen them, and just sort of like when start watching your
Mhm.
plants that they're chewing on. So this is
Right.
just a cute little thing I found on Blogspot. The ladybugs on the left, the Asian beetles on the right. The number of spots is not significant. Both have a variety of colors. The Asian ones have kind of like an M on the top of their head. And look for the white cheeks of the ladybug. So this one said, and I think a lot of these guessed, because these are from different sources, but I just took a quote some. And this one said of the 500 or so North American ladybug species, nearly 200 are exotic species imported. So I guess if they're saying there's 140 native ones, that makes a lot more sense. But over 200 are exotic species imported and released as pest control agents. That's what they were brought in for. In the mid 1980s was when the multicolored Asian ladybird beetle was introduced from Japan by the US Department of Agriculture, and it was for fruit tree health. And as I put in there, federal tax dollars at work. They just don't know. And introducing these species, you don't know what else that's going to upset. But also it's the consideration of what they are doing to the natives. And nobody thought about maybe there's not enough to go around. And this is what's happening. They take over. They reproduce
Right.
more prolifically than ours, and you get into trouble. But with this one in the mid 80s, just a few years after their release, they couldn't find any of the introduced beetles. So that little
Huh.
experiment with a fruit farm, they said that kind of failed. A couple of years after that, it was reintroduced, again, exotic species, but accidentally from a freighter in the port of New Orleans. And the beetles survived this time. By the early 90s, they spread to southeastern US. By 94, they reached the Midwest. And so this explains why our garage walls are now orange. It's still a bit too soon to know just what impact these new ladybugs are having on the native insect populations. They also have an odor. We had a 150-year-old farmhouse or so in Muskingum County that my parents used to own. That we didn't live there or anything, but in the fall when they would come in, this particular place had so many, and it had a definite smell. You could tell the smell when they were around. And they said that odor comes from blood discharged from their leg joints. And it's called reflex bleeding. And it's a common trait of all ladybug species. And it said, so just make sure your ladybugs are relaxed and there won't be any trouble. One of the problems they're finding is the Asian variety of lady beetle is a voracious eater, probably more so. But the problem is, or the good thing is, they eat aphids, which we want to get rid of. And that hunger also distinguishes them more than from the native species found in the US. And digging further on this one too, the Asian species were first imported in 1916. Again, they weren't really taking hold, but again in the 60s, and then again, as we saw in the 80s. And again, first released in the South to protect fruit trees. South Carolina, Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, California, Washington, then Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Connecticut is how they progressed through. They started out as controlled experiments in greenhouses also, made their way across the US, migrated to the UK, and then the rest of Europe. And they really think that they're aggressively threatening an overwhelming native species. If you're interested in this too, and I love to photograph insects too, they do have a ladybug project. And there's a little bit more about this lost ladybug project too, but you can photograph it, give a location, and there's more about this lostladybug.org about importing what they're trying to find in native species and trying to account for how many native ones we have. So, and the other thing that I was going to do this time, which really what I was going to start this on, was mimics and adaptations. And Don touched on that. There are so many interesting adaptations in the natural world. And we talked before that ladybugs taste bad to some predators, and the predators remember and avoid them. And I'm questioning, and again, I'm going to probably get into this later. How does that develop? Is it something that has happened as in Darwin's theories, that they somehow, the ones that were survived are the ones that were a darker color that developed spots by accident? It's fascinating to me about how this happens. But so we go into this, these mimics. On the left, we've got the spotted asparagus beetle. Then we have the leaf beetle is actually on the right. And then the milkweed horn beetle is the one in the middle. I have so many of those in my yard, and I'm not sure if I need to get rid of those or not, because they're prolific on my milkweeds in my pollinator garden. And, I leave them and they're supposed to do that. I know they help pollinate, but I'm not sure if I should have as many as I do.
Mm,
I love that leaf beetle that's there on the right. Look how tiny that is.
pretty.
Absolutely adorable. So then in mimicry, you have the ladybug mimic fly, which is just amazing. And from a more of a distance, the birds that would eat that would see the red/orange with the black spots and may not detect the clear wings on it and things like that. So again, it's an adaptation. The birds will leave that alone. This, and I had seen those or heard those mimic flies before. Then the ladybug mimic spider. What about that? I had never heard of that before. Isn't that incredible? And how did that come by? And then also antlions, which are another subject, would be a fun thing to delve into, but the antlion larvae, which I have seen those around too. And it looks like the yellow species of ladybugs, but then, how colorblind are birds? Do they just see the spots, or can they see red but not the yellow? And question about hummingbirds and things too. Do they really like the red? Anyway, quite interesting mimicry in nature. And that is all I have. But I just found this so interesting because they are so beneficial.
I got another question for you.
Yeah.
Your ladybugs, you can buy them and I guess you have them put in your garden. Do
Yep.
they stay there when you buy them and put them in there? Are they one that stay tutorial?
You hope they do, and hope they find enough aphids in your garden that they're happy and they will lay the eggs on the right host plants. But you question the introduction of where those are coming from. Are they the Asian ones that they're getting? Are they native species?
Okay.
I mean, you go into things that were introduced with good intentions. When I did the invasive show about the privets and about like Russian and autumn olives and things that were introduced, it grows so fast, and then it takes over. Things that aren't well thought out, but were done for good originally.
Mhm.
But I don't know if they would stay or not. I know that you can also buy the praying mantis sacks for your
Right,
garden
right.
also.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
would hope that they would reproduce
Mhm.
and stick around.
Hmm.
Very interesting. Good, great question. And there's so much to learn, so much that we don't know.
Mhm.
Anyway, so they're absolutely fascinating. And a couple of other things. Well, if you Google bugs versus insect, is kind of interesting. And then just for my little last fun thought too is Google / Chrome has a feature now where with certain animals, and now for the first time I saw an insect other than a spider, you can do this 3D larger than life size. And you got to do it on your phone that has a camera.
Cool.
And if on your phone, if you have Chrome on your phone,
Mhm.
Google ladybugs, and you see an article about ladybugs, and you scroll down below that, and it will say, see a ladybug larger than life size. I'm gonna, I don't know if this is gonna show on mine or not. Let's see. Oh, no, it's because of my background. I don't think it to show, darn it. Well, if you want to Google that really quickly, and it has to be Google Chrome browser, see a ladybug larger than life size. And what you do is you click on that view in 3D, and you can activate your camera and then point it somewhere like on a blank space. And you will see a enormous ladybug appear on your screen, and you can take screenshots of it. And you can put it on people's heads. My sort of adopted grandkids showed me that, and put lions standing on top of their dogs and stuff. So it's pretty amusing. So just Google ladybugs, scroll down below that first article, and it says, see a ladybug at larger than life size. Click on view in 3D, and it's quite fun. So I recommend